paradise and put up a fucking lie. With a pink hotel, a boutique and a swinging hot spot. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone? It'd be paradise and put up a fucking line. They took all the trees and put them in a tree museum, and they charged the people $1.50 to see them. No, 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 don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone? You be paradise and put up a fucking line. Hey, farmer, put away your DDT. I don't care about spots on my apples, leave me the birds and the bees. Please, don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone? To be paradise, put up a fucking line.
I'm just turning the microphone on.
So you're going to go get her when you're ready? Okay. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Common Read with Talia, Lakshmi, Kolluri, which is sponsored by the Department of English in the Southeastern Writing Center. I'm Dr. David Hanson, head of the Department of English and World Languages. Welcome to all of our students to the Student Union Ballroom, where we've had to move the event because Talia's stories are so popular and wonderful. And welcome to those of you who are streaming at home. I want to thank the Southeastern Writing Center, the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, and Dr. Fontenot, the Dean, the staff of the Department of English, the Southeastern Channel, and thank you, students, for your interest and your investment in these stories. We want to welcome, especially this morning, our students from our dual enrollment classes who are visiting us on campus, Riverside Academy, Ponchatoula High School, East Ascension, Hahnville, Dutchtown, False River, Ponchatoula, Jewel Sumner, Open Door Christian Academy, and Amite High School. Welcome. Welcome to those of you also who are streaming in your classrooms. And because we've had to move the event, we may still have some stragglers, but it looks like we've got a full house. So this 9:30 event will be a Q&A for what we fed to the Manticore. Come back if you can at 11 o'clock for a reading by Talia. At the end of the event, be sure to exit this side door where there are sign-up sheets, and also there will be samples of our student-run literary journals and our student-run expository writing journals. So if you write a particularly splendid paper in class, in any of your classes, you can submit to the PIC, which is our journal edited by students for students of the pick of best essays on your classes, and also our creative writing journal, which accepts submissions from anyone on campus who can submit to our creative writing journal. So now to introduce Talia Lakshmi Kolluri. What we fed to the Manticore was Talia's remarkable debut collection of stories published by Tin House in 2022. The book was a finalist for the 2023 Carol Shields Prize for Fiction, and it was long-listed for the 2023 Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction, the 2023 Aspen Words Literary Prize, and the 2023 Penn Robert W. Bingham Prize for Debut Short Story Collection. And it was selected as a 2023 ALA RUSA Notable Book. In addition, Talia's short fiction has been published in many distinguished literary journals, including the Minnesota Review, Ecotone, the Southern Humanities Review, The Common, One Story, Orion, Five Dials, and Adroit Journal. Please welcome to Southeastern Louisiana University, Talia Lakshmi Kolluri.
Good morning, everyone. Wow, that was a long walk across the stage. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Hanson, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you to Allison and all of the faculty and staff of the English department for inviting me here. This is the largest crowd I've ever spoken to in my entire life. So I'm a little bit nervous, and if you hear me a little out of breath, don't worry. It's just a panic attack, but I'll be fine. So that introduction made me sound a little bit fancier than I actually am. I promise I'm not a scary person to talk to. So we're here for your questions, and I would love to hear from you. I would love to answer anything you have to ask me. And I know it's always scary to be the first one. So I welcome anyone who has a first question.
So we only have one mic So it might be a little bit easier if you sort of come into the middle and line up rather than have to like navigate all of this stuff. So I know I'm putting the onus on y'all to get up and do this, but I think it'll be easier that way. So just come on up and line up if you have a question. Yeah, someone's got to be first. You'll be fine.
Oh, you want to be fancy? Hold the mic for now.
Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh.
I'm just going to wait for everyone to come up before I ask.
So you don't have to worry. There's so many people waiting. Like,
If I mess up, one of you guys mess up as well, please.
you'll be fine.
If I mess up, you guys got to mess up too.
All right, go ahead.
Is that everyone?
All right, friends, are we ready for the first one? This is exciting. I'm really excited. Oh my gosh. Hello.
Hello. Hello. I don't really have too many questions. But what was I feel like you probably get this question a lot, but what was the overall reason for really making the book? Did you grow up around animals? Were you like Snow White talking to the birds and the squirrels? Like, what was the overall goal, other than obviously bringing awareness to how, poachers, animal abuse, weird things that people do with animals?
Yeah, I am a Disney princess. That's true. The rumors are true. No, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. And I have been asked that question a lot. And I have a stock answer, but I'll get into it a little bit deeper. So the answer that I tell everyone is that I have always been curious about how animals feel and think about the world that we have shaped for them. And that's true. That is the reason, or a reason, why I do it. But does anybody have pets? Can I get a show of hands? Anyone have pets? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay. So anybody ever watched their pet dream? Another show of hands. Yeah, you've seen your pet dream. I have two cats, and one of them, I've caught her meowing in her sleep. It's really super cute. But the thing about cats is they don't really meow to each other. They are actually meowing to communicate with humans. They think they're speaking human. And sometimes they pitch their meow at the same tone as a baby's cry to get your attention, because cats are manipulative, and I love that. But if my cat is meowing in her dream, is she dreaming about me or another person? So part of it is that, I have this curiosity that I really wanted to satisfy. The other thing is, I feel like when we move through the world, we live in this, in a lot of ways, kind of sanitized environment. We have climate-controlled buildings, and we have communication tools and cars that drive us around. And so in many ways, we're very separated from the natural world, but it is not particularly separated from us. Most animals can't sort of sequester themselves away from how humanity impacts them. And so they're required to experience us and our impacts on the earth. And so I'm sure they have opinions about it, but I can't ask them. So I'm trying to imagine my way toward an answer. Yeah, thank you for your question.
How did you exactly choose the title for your book, What We Fed the Manticore?
How did I choose the title? So that's the title of one of the stories in the collection. And I don't know how other writers do it, but I often come up with the title first. Not always. Sometimes I really struggle with the title. So if you're struggling with your titles, don't worry about it. But I came up with that title very early when I was writing that story. I knew I wanted to have a manticore be a consumptive beast. And if I'm being really honest, I thought it sounded cool. So when it was time to choose a title for the book, I picked 3 stories and listed. Usually, if you have for anyone who doesn't know, if you have a short story collection, usually the title of the book is going to be the title of one of the stories. So I picked 3 different stories that had titles that I liked, but this one was my favorite title. And I just kind of put that as option number 1. And I let my editor weigh in, and she liked that one too. So I'm glad, because I love tigers so much, and I really wanted a tiger on the cover. So this got me there. Yeah. Thank you.
I wanted to ask, so how do you start off your writing? Like, do you listen to music, or how do you let creativity just flow?
Did everyone hear that question? I know I'm probably supposed to repeat the questions. The question is, how do I let creativity flow, and how do I start a story? That's a great question. I love that so much. It depends on the story. Often I do listen to music. I do. And many different stories will have a different like song that has the texture that I'm looking for. Sometimes it creates like an embodied feeling that goes with the animal. I'm hoping this is adjusted right. Goes with the animal that I'm trying to write about. But sometimes I start with a piece of news about an animal, and I'm thinking, I really want to know how they would have told this piece of information to me if I asked them about it. And then sometimes I look for a song that kind of helps open up the sort of imaginative window that I can look through. There was one story I wrote that was initially inspired by a painting. And I saw it, I saw the painting, and the first line of the story just kind of arrived in my imagination. I'd wanted to write this is a polar bear story. If anyone has read the book, there's a story about a polar bear. And I wanted to write about bears, and I was having a hard time finding my way in. Found my way in when I saw the painting, and the line just arrived and gave me sort of the key to unlock it. Sometimes it's unpredictable. But I've also had stories that I really didn't feel like they started from what you might call a flow state. I really struggled to get the story out of me. And sometimes in those instances, I start with the ending. And I say, well, this is where I want to land. And I don't know where I'm starting, but I'm going to land here. And then I work backwards. Thank you for your question.
Why do you prefer to write from the perspective of animals rather than humans?
Oh, why do I write as an animal and not a person, or animals and not people? That's a great question, and I'm going to tell you a secret. I am terrible at writing people. I've written some stories primarily featuring people, and they're so bad. I don't know why that is. I think that every writer finds the voice that feels most authentic to them. And I think one of the things that I struggled with when writing about human stories is I am a human, as you can tell from my appearance. And so it feels very close, feels very vulnerable. It feels very exposed to write human emotions as a human writer. And I think that kept me from being an honest writer. And so I have found that in addition to my curiosity about animals, if I add an animal filter to something that I want to say, I am able to be just more truthful. I'm able to be more experimental. I'm able to say everything I want to say, and then I can edit, and I just feel more liberated that way. Yeah. Thank you for your question.
Okay, what story did you like the most out of this collection?
What story is my favorite out of this collection? That's really hard to answer. That's a great question, but wow, that's really hard to answer. I love them all. I'll tell you which one was the most fun to write and which one was the hardest to write, because I like being challenged and I like having fun. So I had a really fun time writing the pigeon story. Let your body meet the ground, because I really wish I could fly like a bird. I wish I had wings, and I wish I could experience the sky that way. And so I really enjoyed that one. I enjoyed the research of learning about pigeons and their navigation systems, and how they move through the world. And I really had a fun time creating the personality. The hardest story for me to write was the story narrated by a whale, because whales are so different from people that I really had to work really hard to find a way to cast my imagination into a whale's sense of the world, which is very different from ours. Did you all know that whales' inner ear kind of like sort of floats within their skull? And that makes the way that sound resonates very different for them. And so I had to think a lot about living in a soundscape and perceiving the world without relying on my vision primarily. So that was very challenging, but that also made it really fun.
What themes did you intentionally incorporate into the Good Donkey, and which ones would you say were unintentionally incorporated into it?
What themes did I intentionally incorporate into the Good Donkey and what were unintentionally? Wow, that is such a good question. Thank you for that. So I don't often think directly about themes right away when I'm writing a story. I think about first just what are the things that I want to tell. And when I began The Good Donkey, which I think is a really, particularly now, a very meaningful story to me, I wanted to understand and examine life in Gaza and in Palestine, but I'm not a Palestinian writer, so I felt I needed to write as more of an adjacent character. And so I wanted to kind of just understand the space and the experience from a non-human point of view, and I wanted to observe it and sort of bear witness to things that I had read in the news. So that was one thing I held in mind as I was writing the piece. Probably an unintentional theme that came out that probably is more universal is the theme of sort of family connection, loss, community, caring for each other. Those themes probably emerged a little bit organically. The more direct story I was trying to tell was a fictionalization of events that did happen in Gaza. Thank you.
What were some of the struggles you faced when writing your stories?
I think some of the struggles I faced were probably oriented towards scientific accuracy. So if you're trying to write as an animal, it's really fun to imagine all of the things that you think it might be to be an animal. But I also think that I'm asking a lot of readers, I'm asking them to believe that animals can talk, that they can speak English, or if the work is translated, whatever it's translated into. And I think that's asking a lot of readers. I'm asking them to believe something that most people are not observing to be true. So I think that I owe it to readers to give them some anchor, and I think of the anchor as accurate scientific information to sort of bolster up my animals. So I think the hardest part was ensuring that all of my animal behavior, all of my environments, all of my climate patterns were as accurate as possible. I'll give you an example. I wrote a wolf story, and in that story, the narrating wolf has pups, and also it's snowing. And so wolf pups are normally born in the spring, and I was very worried that, is it possible for it to be snowing in Wyoming in the spring? Would this be realistic? So I spent a lot of time researching historical weather patterns in Wyoming and in Yellowstone. So it's that kind of detail work that isn't always as exciting. It does snow in the spring, like there is still snow on the ground in Wyoming in the spring. So it is possible. So that, ensuring scientific accuracy to the best of my ability. And I know it's not entirely accurate. I'm asking readers to just kind of join me on a little leap. But yeah, that was it.
Were there some stories that didn't make the cut in the collection?
There was one that I never showed anybody that didn't make the cut. It didn't make the cut because I never shared it. But it was, so yes, there was. It was another wolf story, and I think having two wolves probably is two wolves too many. Not in my opinion, probably in the publishing world's opinion. You can have one wolf at a time, I think, is where they would land on that. But maybe I'll save it for another collection. Thank you.
Good morning. So I do have two questions, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
But my first one would be, in your story, I believe the name was, I'm not good with names, I believe the name was The Hunted, The Muse, and The Tame. I noticed that you use short and direct dialogue. Did that serve a purpose?
Oh, so why did I use short and direct dialogue? I'm glad you asked about that story. So when I first wrote it, it was really, really different. It was from the first person perspective. Oh, this podium is moving. Oh no. It was from the first person perspective. So I changed the point of view. And when I had written it in the first person, the narrator was speaking the whole time. So when he spoke in the story, probably I didn't need to expand on that a lot. When I rewrote it in the third person, I added some characters. I developed the scenes a lot more. But I still liked that feeling of really short declarative sentences because I felt like these are working dogs and they're kind of all business. And in a lot of ways, their role and their job is to get everyone across the ice. So they don't have a lot of time, I think, to engage in a lengthy discourse and to expound on their thoughts, which is why our narrator or our close point of view character, Bendix, is so unusual because he's thinking a lot about things that the rest of the dogs don't appear to have time for.
And my second question was, so for the theme of that story, I believe, or at least from my perspective, I thought that the well was an impending thought of death. Was that what it was, or was it something else?
So I'll say the first thing, which is that whatever the story means to you is actually the right answer. Because so writing is a creative act, but reading is also kind of a creative act, right? So once I write something and I let it go, and then you receive it, everything that you read is existing within your own mind, with your own experiences and the things that shape you. And so whatever the story tells you, what you create out of your life and the story, that is a new thing. And so part one of my answer is, if that's how you feel the story is meant to be interpreted, then that's right. But I will tell you, I did think about sled dogs and their end-of-life experiences when I was writing it. One of the things I learned in my research is that for this particular group, the Sledge Patrol, when the dogs are no longer able to work with the Danish Royal Navy, they are often put down. And I thought that was really sad. And I wanted to imagine a dog that had a little bit more agency. So the thought of impending death is part of what shapes Bendix. So yeah, thanks.
Hi, good morning. So you took the stories like the one from Gaza and the Wolves of Yellowstone and obviously rewrote them from the point of view of animals, but you had all this power as the author to change the ending. Why did you leave them so sad?
Why did I leave the ending so sad? You know, the most frequent feedback I get on this collection is lots of crying. And I think it's okay to be sad, actually. I think sometimes we're afraid of expressing these sort of deep, anguished feelings, but the world is painful. And sometimes we need to release those sorrowful emotions, and maybe literature can help some people feel the things that they were not giving themselves permission to feel. I also think that so the climate crisis is very pervasive in this collection. It was very much on my mind when I was writing it, and I think that it is sad, and I think that as we watch species loss, as we watch our climate transform tremendously, there is mourning that goes along with that. So I think that it's okay to have a book of mourning. But I will tell you, my editor, as I was finishing it, she said, can we have one story with a happy ending? So I did write one and we put it at the end. Yeah. Thank you.
I wanted to ask, I noticed that you did a lot of research and you took a lot of time to fully understand the nature and the point of view and the science behind each of these animals and their climate and every little detail. Which one felt the most transformative for you in researching and writing the entire story?
Which story felt most transformative in researching and writing it? Transformative. I think, so for me, one of the, that's a great question. I'm having a hard time with this one. There probably is more than one. One of the ones that felt very transformative to me was a story about vultures. How many people see, I mean, I don't know, do y'all have a lot of vultures here in town? Like, do they fly around? Do you see a lot of seeing? No? Yes. Okay, yes on the vultures, yes. I really love them. I love vultures. I think they're a misunderstood bird. I think in researching that story, I understood a lot more about what vultures and carrion animals generally do for the environment. And I think it was transforming in a bigger way the way I think about death. Not to be morbid, I think about death a lot. I think that dying is part of the natural experience, and I think that vultures are a beautiful component to cycling through life and recognizing the beauty of how they care for our environment through feeding on carrion and what they do for us and how we should appreciate them. That was pretty transformative. Yeah. Thank you.
Is there anything you draw heavy inspiration from?
Yeah, heavy inspiration. So I really like folktales. Anybody a big fan of folktales out here? Yes, beautiful. I really love them. So my background is South Asian. My dad's from India. He's from South India. And in India, there is a series of stories. They're very common. Everyone knows them. They're called the Panchatantra. And they are animal fables. But every culture, if you go back far enough, you will find that the natural world is present in almost every culture's fables and traditional stories. And so in a lot of ways, I was inspired by oral storytelling traditions, fables, animal myths, and I wanted to participate in that in a modern way. Thank you.
Okay, so judging by the emotional scenery, that's how you worded from the stories that I've read so far. How did you decide the moods, the mood or the tones of the stories?
How did I decide the tone of each story? By the way, I love your shirt. Is that the Grinch? Yes, I love the Grinch. I let the tone decide itself. I don't know if that makes sense. So sometimes I'll have something I want to say or something I want to describe or a story I want to imagine, but I don't know how it's going to feel until I start writing it. There's a little bit of letting the characters be who they are and letting the story take itself down its own path. I don't know if maybe the fact that all these stories are sad says something about me, and am I sad? Maybe, but I let whatever emotions I was feeling infuse the piece. I wrote them over the course of about 10 years, so I had a lot of life that happened as I was writing them. So there's a lot of my own feelings that I put in there. So I let them write themselves. Thank you.
So I have two questions actually. I was reading, and what we fed to the Manticore stood out a lot to me, and I noticed it's also the main title, and I feel like something being the main title makes it stand out as importance. It felt very allegorical to me, and that everything in it actually represented a bigger picture. And I was discussing it with all my classmates of what do we actually think this means, and everyone had a different answer, and it made me realize that our different interpreted experiences and coming together to discuss it adds so much meaning to the story. And I wonder if it's also the most important one to you, or if you have a certain idea you wanted to tell all of us.
Oh wow, that's a great question and a big one. And you're right. Everyone is going to have their own interpretation that will make meaning for the story for each individual reader. And when you discuss them as a group, that does add meaning for the group discussion? That's a beautiful question. I think probably that particular story is the most overt, I guess in my mind, story about climate crisis and natural disasters that are becoming ever more pervasive. I read a book several years ago called The Great Derangement by Amitav Ghosh. Has anyone heard of this one? Beautiful book, and it was really important to me. And he talked a lot about how many of the disasters that we experience as part of a changing climate, I know all of you have probably experienced tropical storms, the history of Katrina in this state, and in my home state of California, ever larger wildfires. All of these things, each time they happen, they feel what Amitav Ghosh would describe as uncanny and unusual and so extreme that we can't give them words, but they are happening, and we should give them words, and our art should reflect what we are experiencing. So I wanted that story to do that. Yeah.
And also, why did you decide to make all of these short stories instead of picking another way to write it or connecting them, all of them together?
That's a great question. Why did I make them all short stories instead of connecting them? I wanted to make sure that I could cover many different parts of the globe, and I wanted to cover many different animals. And I didn't want to be constrained by a plot that would carry through all of them. If I wanted to deviate, I wanted to have that freedom to sort of branch out a little bit. And so, yeah, that's why I let them all be individual stories. Thank you.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
During the process of writing this book, did you ever second guess yourself on how you were expressing these topics through the animals?
Yes, all the time. All the time. All the time. Being a writer is also means being full of self-doubt. But I set it aside. When I was writing, I just set it aside, and I decided I'm going to write everything that I want to say, and then I'll show it to people. Any writers in the room, it's really helpful to have trusted writing friends, people who will be kindly honest, who will tell you when you're going sideways in your work and when you're not, and when you're saying something that they think you should keep saying. So I showed my work to my friends. I did. I showed my work to lots of friends, and I listened to their advice. I didn't always take it, but I always listened. And so I did have self-doubt, and I did wonder, am I writing the right thing? Do I even have a right to write these stories? But I did it anyway, and I think that part of being an artist is having the courage to say something that is important to you. Yeah, thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Nice to meet you. So you have a really vibrant book cover, and it's a lot of different colors. I just want to know what they mean to you. Like, what significance do they hold?
Thanks for asking about the cover. I love this cover so much. I really wanted a tiger. I'm going to talk about the cover really quick, and then I'll get to the meaning. I really wanted a tiger on the cover, and I didn't know if that would be possible. This is a piece. This tiger is a piece of art called, I think it's Spring Tiger, by a comic book artist. Her name is on the cover of the book, and I'm so sorry I don't remember it at this moment. But she drew the piece, and then our design director at the time at Tin House embellished it, added some additional texture to it. And I think while I didn't choose the colors, I think the colors fit really well with the story. I think that they evoke a lot of the different environments that we are crossing in the book. Yellow is my favorite color, so that was cool. And I did want vibrancy, because I feel like the natural world is very vibrant, and so I think it reflects that vibrancy. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
In the future, are you going to continue writing like animal-centered stories? Are you going to like explore new things?
Okay. Am I going to keep writing animal stories? Yes. Yes, I am. I'm writing another book right now, and I don't know how many of you know superstitious writers. I'm one of them, though, and so I don't talk about something I'm working on until it's far enough along to feel like it's like cool. I can talk about it. But I am writing another book. It's animal based. Yeah.
What did you want us as like readers and the audience to take most from your stories?
Oh, what do I want you all to take away from the stories? The very most, I would really, really hope that if you loved a place or a character or a creature in my story, I hope that you will learn more about that place or that person or that character or that creature, and that you will learn about the real things that inspired my imagination, because I love the natural world so much. There is tremendous beauty in this world that we all live in globally. There's just tremendous beauty, and I really hope that people find their way to loving it. Hopefully more than I do. Hopefully more. Thank you.
Hi, good morning.
Hi.
So this question was written specifically in regard to the hunted, the haunted, the hungry, and the tame. How often do you use allegories, biblical or otherwise, in your stories, and how greatly do these affect the message?
So I read them. I read allegories and biblical stories, and not just biblical, but stories from a number of different religions. I think religious texts are often our earliest literature, and some of them are very beautifully written. So I read a lot of them, and I think I probably absorb them without consciously knowing what I'm using at the time that I use them. I think that if you read a lot of allegorical and religious texts, they can kind of permeate the way you see the world and the language you might use to talk about the world around you. So I think some of it comes out that way. And what was the second half of your question? How greatly do they affect the message? Well, that's I think on the reader. It depends on whether or not you come to the story with that same history, with that same literary sort of atmosphere. And does it come to you when you read it? Does that speak to you when you read it? Thank you.
All right, I have like two different questions. So since your stories are set in various locations, how did cultural and ethical challenges shape your portrayal of animals in conflicts like the good donkey and the rhino and conservation efforts?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if everyone didn't hear it, the question was, how did what were my ethical considerations as I was writing stories around the globe, particularly the story in Gaza and also the story in Kenya? I just want to talk really briefly. I think that when writing outside our experience, there's a writer who's a lot more experienced and famous than me, named Alexander Chee, who has a wonderful essay on this topic of writing outside of our experiences. And I think that when I was writing those two stories in particular, it was very, very important to me, particularly with The Good Donkey, actually. It was very important to me that I not be understood as speaking on behalf of or writing on behalf of the Palestinian people. I'm not Palestinian. It is not my story to tell. However, I did want to sort of bear witness to to things I had learned about the area. And I saw another writer described this practice as not writing for, but writing with a people. And so I think of it that way. But because I really wanted it to be clear that I'm not speaking for someone, I chose a character that was not human. So the donkey is human adjacent, right? He's a working animal. So he's there to observe, but he doesn't fully share the experience. And I did the same thing in Kenya with our hound. Not fully in the human experience, and so observing it from afar. And I think one of the things that allowed me to do was to speak about what did I see when I was reading about these areas? What did I understand from my observations? And what could I understand if I put my own mind inside an animal mind and took away all of my human preconceptions, right? Because we all have things we learn about the world that shape how we see things that happen. And I think that I wanted to take away as much of that filter as possible and just be a pure observer. So it's challenging, and I think it's important to consider why you're writing a story and to be mindful of the communities that are being represented in your work. And so I always encourage people, particularly when talking about stories I've written that are set in different parts of the world, I encourage everyone to read writers from those areas because they are the writers most apt and equipped to speak for their people. Thank you.
And since you're from California, right?
Yeah.
Did any of California's liberal environmental policies influence your storytelling, and what research did you conduct to ensure these were accurate?
So that's a great question. I didn't really think about environmental policy actually while I was writing it. And this collection doesn't even have a California story in it. I have written a California story since this was published. I wrote a story set in the Sequoia National Park in the Sierra Nevadas. I think when I'm writing creatively, I'm trying to take away any sort of like human structure. So I just dropped all my pens, hold on. I'm trying to take away the human structures, right? So human structures, things like environmental policy and why we make decisions about the world we live in. Those are very human-driven decisions, and they often don't consider really, in a very substantial, meaningful way, the animals that live near us. I'll use California as an example. We have a mountain lion population, historic mountain lion population in California, and in Southern Cal and Los Angeles, many of the populations are cut off from each other because of the highway system. And so some of the mountain lions have very inbred genetics because they weren't able to move to other parts of the mountains to diversify their lion population. So we didn't really think about those things, right, as we're building our roads. So I don't necessarily think about the policies. I ask myself, what is the animal's experience? And if the environmental policy had an effect on the experience, I'm not really speaking to that directly because probably there are a lot that I don't know about. But I think to your question, I think what I'm looking at is how is the world now? What is our experience on the ground now as living, breathing things, and what has that produced for all the things we share the world with? Thanks for your question.
Hi. I have a quote that I wanted to ask you, like the meaning of it, from The Hunted, the Haunted, the Hungry, and the Tame. Want me to read it for you?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
On the top of the world, the tundra is vast and the light is strange. Sometimes it bends things until they transform. At distance still becomes the nose of a polar bear, and the polar bear becomes an owl, the owl becomes a ship, and the ship becomes a dog, and the dog becomes a wolf, and so on. But a well is always so well. I just wanted to know the meaning of it.
Oh, by the way, that was a beautiful reading. Thank you for that. So when I wrote that, I was thinking a lot about tricks of the light and how this happens in the desert too, when you're in an open area and there's just uninterrupted, unblemished landscape in front of you, it can be deceptive. What you see is deceptive. So all of those animals in the beginning are above ground dwelling creatures. And so they can, depending on your vantage point, be confused for each other. But the whale always being the whale, that's meant to indicate that they're separated from all the land dwellers by swimming under the sea and sometimes under the ice. So it's just trying to be poetic. Thank you.
So I just wanted to ask what your intended audience was for the book, if you had one.
Well, what was my intended audience? I was writing a little bit for me. I love animal stories. So when I was a kid, I really loved pretty much anything with animals in it. And my favorite book for a long time was Watership Down. Has anyone read Watership Down? It's narrated by rabbits. Yeah, I saw some hands. It's a good one. I read it recently and it still holds up. It's still very, very good. I couldn't find a lot of books narrated by animals for adults. It sort of felt like once you turn 12, everyone expects you to only be interested in people. I didn't stay interested only in people. So I was writing to fill a need I had. And I wanted, so maybe other people like me, but actually I kind of want anyone who thinks they might be interested in animals, or maybe someone who isn't interested in animals now but is after they read something I wrote, anyone who's open to learning about the natural world, anyone who wants to know what their cat or dog is dreaming about when they move in their sleep, anyone. Yeah, thank you.
I want to know how you chose the animals for your stories.
So I choosing the animals for my stories was kind of a vibes-based process. Part of it was what animals am I interested in? I really love tigers, so I had to have tigers in there. I really love wolves. I've always wanted to fly. Some of it was places that I wanted to explore. Some of it was learning about something that happened to an animal and being deeply, deeply curious about what that animal thought about the experience, and then imagining an answer. The hunted, the haunted, the hungry, the tame is a great example. Oh, my earring. That story was originally inspired by something I read in National Geographic, and the story was all about the people, and I couldn't find anything that explained maybe what the dogs might have thought of it, so I wrote one for myself. I rewrote a National Geographic story from the perspective of dogs because I didn't think there were enough dogs in the story. So it's many things like that. Curiosity, driven by curiosity about the world around me, and what I'm shown about the world around me. Thank you.
Hello, I'm back up here again.
Welcome back.
I had a particular question for May God Forever Bless the Rhino Keepers, mostly because as I got a little bit, I had to read it a lot of times. I had to read it a lot, or I had like text to speech, and I have it, and I listened to it. And as I further got down too near when the dog had, eventually lost his leg, I swear that didn't happen. I just didn't understand it. But as the dog lost his leg, his arch nemesis, the monkey, or I think it was a monkey.
Yeah.
His arch nemesis, like the monkey, came in. He was like very nice, and like, oh, they don't got you, huh? Kind of like we're like one and the same now. I always kind of wondered why that kind of happened, because I was really confused because they're arch and nemesis, they're enemies, like, so like why are they friends now? And also I was really confused. Mostly I was just really confused on why did that happen, because I decided to Google other people's opinions, and like someone said that like the dog killed the monkey's mom, and I'm like, where was that stated ever? So I was really wondering kind of what's the history between the two. Why they got so much beef?
Yes. Why does the chimpanzee and the dog and the hound have so much beef? Well, part of it is that, so I actually based this story on a real place. There's a preserve in Kenya called, I think it's pronounced Olpejeta. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but they have the last northern white rhinos in the world, and it's a big sanctuary which has a lot of different animals, including chimpanzees. And I imagined, so they're both animals that have a human proximity. So the chimpanzee has a really cool little like place that they live in, and they interact with the people. The dog is a working dog, so he lives with Joseph and has this relationship. And I think their shared proximity to humans leads them to be a little bit in competition socially. Do you ever have a frenemy, someone who's like kind of your friend, but you're kind of like, I don't know, we're kind of cool, but we're kind of like rivals. It's not pure enemies, right? It's a mixed friendship. And I think that in those situations, when something truly terrible happens to one half of that friendship, the other half will find their compassion and be a little kinder. So that's what happened. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
I have like 2.5 questions.
Okay.
So, in the sled dog story, why did you choose a whale and not a more traditionally scary, grim depiction of death, like shark, for example?
So that one was because this is the scientific accuracy. I wanted to make sure I used animals that are in the area, and bowhead whales, which are endangered, by the way, are in that northern part of the Arctic Circle. Bowhead whales do migrate all the way up to northeast Greenland. So I wanted the natural landscape to be reflective of what it really is. And I also wanted the dog to be perceived as a little bit irrational. So bowhead whales are baleen whales, and they don't eat mammals, they eat plankton. And so part of it is our dog is a little bit irrational. He's hallucinating and not really tethered to reality the way he needs to be. And I wanted that to kind of reflect that. What was your second question?
So you compared the dog and the whale to a monolith, a zeppelin, and a leviathan. Why? Like, what does that mean?
This is another writer thing. It sounded cool. I liked the way it sounded. But I also just wanted to think of like big, imposing things that move through the sea. They don't actually move through the sea, but again, this is an irrational dog. I wanted to think of things that would sound imposing to the dog, who is intimidated by whatever he's experiencing internally.
Okay. Why did why'd you compare the dog to a leviathan?
Because then at the end, he becomes the thing in the sea.
Ah.
He becomes what he's afraid of.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the order also changes from the dog to the whale, right?
I think so, yeah.
Was there a reason for that, or did it just happen?
I liked the way it sounded.
Fair enough.
Sometimes that's the answer, right? Sometimes you're just like, I liked this was the artistry. It worked for me.
Do you have any advice on how to keep a reader's attention in whatever you are writing? Like how to make it more interesting?
Yeah, I'm sorry, my earring came out. I'm fixing it. So the reason, yes, how do you keep a reader interested as you're writing? So here's a sort of a secret. When you're writing and you're revising, you will probably have read your own work multiple times. I know I do. I usually go through like 12 or 13 revisions before I feel like I'm ready to even send it to friends. So rereading my work a lot. And I think that if you are bored when you're reading your own work, your reader is also going to be bored. If you're bored while you're writing it, your reader is going to be bored. You want to look for things that feel compelling to you as you're creating the work. And if you step away from your piece for a few weeks and you come back to it and you find that it's an invigorating piece and you want to know what happens next and you want to keep going, then you have kept your reader's attention because you kept your own attention. Thanks.
I see like you're real big on the idea of empathy. And I was thinking, how do you present a vision to like a better place from an outside-in perspective? How do you place that open door in a closed room like that?
How do I present the vision of a better place from an outside perspective? That's a great question. Thank you for that. I think what it does, or at least what I hope it does, is that I hope that it inspires readers to ask themselves what could be different about the way I move through the world based on what I'm seeing in this story. And so I think it leads to more questions. It leads to people asking if they should frame something different for themselves, or change their approach to how they live or how they see the world. Does that answer your question?
All right, we're going to have our last 2 questions here. No pressure.
No pressure.
So I'm really loving all these content-based questions, especially from all these high schoolers. But I am curious about your experience with publication. You mentioned all your self-doubt and whatnot, and trusting your friends. What was that process like, and what made you make the leap? Did you always want to write a book? Did it just kind of happen?
Yeah, so I always wanted to write a book. This is like a childhood dream, was I'm gonna be an author. I really wanted to do it. This actually, speaking at a school, also a childhood dream. So thanks everyone. This is pretty exciting. So, but really I write just because I feel like I must, right? I feel like the work compels me to write, like I have to do it. And that's how a lot of writers feel. Eventually, you get to a place where you can't stop yourself. I wanted to share my work because I wanted to be part of this like really, this great conversation of literature, because I wanted to participate. So I was sending my stuff to journals, and I hoped that one day I would publish a book, but it happened a lot earlier than I expected. I had a little bit of a non-traditional experience. So the first story in the book, The Good Donkey, was published in a magazine called The Common, and wonderful journal. Any writers out there, please consider submitting to The Common. They're wonderful. And they also really nurture early career writers. So the editor there, Jen Acker, really nurtured my story and encouraged me and was wonderful, a wonderful editor. And after that story was published, I was contacted by an editor at Tin House asking if I had a book. And I was like, I have 7 stories. Is that a book? I don't know. So I sent it to her and she said, okay, this is nice. I like these. Can you write a couple more? And I said, sure. And so then I panicked and I wrote a couple more. And then they made me an offer, and I actually didn't have an agent, and it's really difficult to understand a book contract when you're very excited about it, and so I needed a little help. So then I sort of went backwards and I panicked and I asked a friend for help, and I got connected with an agent and then moved forward with the book publication. But it really kind of went backwards. A lot of people write the book first and then they start asking for an agent, and then the agent sends the book out, and I did it a little backwards. So we'll see what happens next time. I have no idea how that works, but my experience was, I think maybe the thing to take away from my experience is that editors of literary journals, they love literature, they love reading, they love writing, they love writers, and they want to cultivate art, and they want to help you get your work out there. And so I was blessed with a number of very generous editors who believed in me and believed in what I wanted to say. Thanks for that question.
My question is more about the structure of the book. So is there a particular reason for having the short stories in the order that you have it?
I picked most of the order, but not all of it. I picked The Good Donkey to go first, and I picked the Let Your Body Meet the Ground to go last. And then I just sort of like closed my eyes and scattered them in the middle, and then my editor decided to reshape the middle. So she actually mapped out the order, and she would I assign a tone to each story, and then she was looking for the flow of emotion from one story to the next. And I think it was good that she did that, because she was able to be objective about what they felt like, and was able to tell me what would help the collection, like move readers along. Thank you.
All right, we're going to have our final question now.
Is this your first time speaking to like a school, or do you go to like other schools and do this regularly?
So this is my first time participating in something this big. I've been to like one other university, and it was a class. So that was really fun. This is way bigger. This is actually my first time doing something this big. Yeah, very exciting. That's all our questions. So thank you so much, everyone.
Those were absolutely terrific questions. Thank you for such thoughtful questions, and thank you to Talia for such thoughtful answers. The sign-up sheets are out here. Make sure to sign out as you go. Thank you.